Welcome. We are looking at a true crime story today that is, well, it's a truly sobering lesson.
It really is.
It's about how quickly a factual investigation can be just completely overwhelmed by public fear, by sensational rumor. We're focusing on the tragic death of Jeannette DePalma, a case that has haunted New Jersey for, what is it now, over 50 years?
It is essential to approach this with the solemnity it deserves. We are, after all, discussing the unsolved murder of a 16-year-old girl back in 1972.
Yeah.
And our source material here, it ranges from original police reports to very recent investigative journalism. It gives us the tools to really analyze why this case is still so stubbornly unsolved.
Our goal in this analysis is, I think, straightforward, but it's also crucial. We need to separate the confirmed facts of the initial investigation, the established medical evidence, from this swirling vortex of occult allegations that came to define the case for decades.
Exactly.
For anyone trying to understand true crime history, this case really shows the powerful, distorting lens of sensationalism.
We'll track the mystery chronologically. We're going to start with Jeannette's disappearance in 1972. Look at the immense challenges and the failings of the early police work, and then we'll assess the very latest and, I think, most compelling lead.
Which involves a notorious serial killer.
A very notorious one.
So let's begin by grounding ourselves in that timeline, the summer of 1972. Jeannette Christine DePalma was born in 1956. So by August of 72, she's a 16-year-old girl living in Springfield Township, Union County, New Jersey.
Right.
The date that's really etched into the official record is Monday, August 7th, 1972.
And on that afternoon, Jeannette left her home on Clearview Road. The interaction with her mother was completely mundane, totally unremarkable at the time.
What did she say?
She just said she was heading out to take a train to visit a friend, a normal activity for a teenager in that area, a small routine act of independence.
But she never completed that journey.
No.
She didn't arrive at her friend's house, and she never came home that evening.
The alarm, naturally, was immediate. Her parents filed a missing person report with the Springfield police the very next day, August 8th.
And the initial investigation, I assume, focused on a standard runaway or missing person scenario.
It did, but the horrific reality of what happened wouldn't surface for another 6 long, agonizing weeks.
That 6-week period of just not knowing, it's just central to the emotional weight of this case, isn't it?
Absolutely, not just for the family, but for the entire community. When a young person vanishes, every single day that passes makes a positive outcome less and less likely.
And then September 19th, 1972.
That's when the body was found. The location was inside Springfield's Hoodale Quarry, which was a pretty isolated and somewhat intimate location.
Let's give some context on the quarry, because the setting itself plays such a huge role in the folklore of this tragedy.
It does.
The Hoodale Quarry wasn't just a simple gravel pit. This was an abandoned industrial site. It was full of deep trenches, towering rock faces, isolated areas of scrub brush and woods.
To local teens, places like that, they often become spots for gathering, away from parents or police patrols.
Which makes them incredibly difficult to police. But for investigators, it's a vast, complicated, and a potentially compromised crime scene.
The whole environment is just characterized by neglect and isolation. Controlling the integrity of a scene like that is, well, it's incredibly difficult.
And the specific spot where her remains were found, this is key. It was atop a cliff known locally for decades as the Devil's Teeth.
And we really have to underscore that point. That ominous name predated Jeannette's death. It confirms the site already had this dark, almost forbidden reputation in the community.
It's a chilling coincidence it would later be seized upon.
Oh, completely. It lent credence to these sensational theories that otherwise had no foundation at all.
And the manner of discovery. This is probably the most visceral detail of the whole case, the one that immediately conveys the tragedy and the sheer horror involved.
It's awful. A local dog, just a household pet, brought a decomposing human right forearm and hand back to its owner.
I can't imagine. That single awful clue, a dog dropping human remains, that's what forced authorities to search that dense, rocky quarry area.
And that search culminated in them finding the rest of Jeannette's skeletal remains.
The decomposition itself must have presented huge challenges.
2 major challenges right away. First, she had been there for a significant period of time, most likely the entire 6 weeks she was missing. So this exposure to the elements meant much of the traditional forensic evidence would be gone.
Destroyed.
And second, her condition severely hampered any immediate forensic efforts. The window for gathering definitive evidence was already closed before the investigation could even officially begin at the scene.
And the psychological impact on the community must have been immense.
Oh, huge! This wasn't just a missing person anymore. This was a homicide discovered in a place already associated with local legend and fear.
The combination of the devil's teeth setting and that gruesome discovery.
It ensured this story would not just be local news. It was primed for sensationalism from the very beginning.
It almost feels like that setting, the devil's teeth,
Yeah.
it guaranteed the police would be fighting a narrative battle from the moment they got there.
So the Springfield Police Department, working with the Union County Prosecutor's Office, they launched the homicide investigation immediately, but they were working against time and severe forensic limitations.
The state of the remains, plus the state of forensic science in 1972.
It just presented these massive, immediate obstacles that handicapped the whole process from the start.
The first, and you could argue the most devastating hurdle, was establishing the actual cause of death.
The autopsy was inconclusive.
And when you're trying to prosecute a murder case, starting without a confirmed cause of death makes every single step after that exponentially harder. It creates an ambiguity that investigators just struggle to overcome.
We can pull a few concrete facts from the forensic report, though, despite the decomposition. The examination of the skeleton and the remaining bits of clothing, they confirmed there were no overt signs of massive physical trauma.
So no broken bones.
No bone fractures, no bullet wounds, and no knife strikes were found. This suggests the means of death wasn't something immediately obvious, like blunt force trauma. It ruled out several conventional homicide methods right away.
Yet, and this is critical, the coroner, Dr. Bernard Ehrenberg, he didn't just stop there.
No, he didn't.
He suspected strangulation and officially stated he could not rule it out during the autopsy. This is significant. Why would the coroner lean toward strangulation without hard physical evidence?
That's a crucial analytical point. Strangulation or asphyxia is notoriously difficult to prove definitively, especially after soft tissue has decomposed. If Jeannette had been manually strangled, the only real evidence might be, say, subtle bruising or fractures to the hyoid bone, which is a tiny, fragile bone in the throat.
And with the body being skeletal.
Proving that was impossible. However, the fact that he suspected it suggests something in the scene's context, or maybe just the exclusion of other factors, led Dr. Ehrenberg toward that conclusion.
And that suspicion was strong enough for the prosecutor's office to categorize the case as an unsolved homicide.
Immediately, they committed resources to a murder investigation, even without that fully confirmed cause of death.
This ambiguity, though, it created a perfect opening for contradictory theories to start circulating. And sometimes, those theories came from the investigating body itself. I'm thinking about the drug use rumors.
Yes. A persistent rumor, reportedly offered up by the Springfield police themselves, was the innuendo that Jeannette died of a drug overdose.
It's a common tactic, isn't it, in early cold cases?
It is, a kind of defense mechanism. You try to shift focus onto the victim's supposed lifestyle rather than the failure of the system to protect her.
But this theory, it runs into factual problems pretty quickly.
It certainly does. Multiple sources refute it. For one, no drug paraphernalia was found on or around the body.
And the autopsy report itself makes no mention of a drug overdose as a medical possibility.
Correct. Furthermore, testimony from her friends and family was pretty consistent. They said while she might occasionally smoke marijuana socially, which was common for the era, she wasn't known to use any other drugs that would suggest a fatal overdose was even likely.
The medical examiner, who suspected strangulation, clearly didn't prioritize the overdose theory.
But the remains did yield a unique and largely overlooked medical mystery.
This is the lead content.
Exactly. The coroner discovered an unusually high amount of lead in the remains. This is noted in the official sources, but crucially, no explanation for this high lead count was ever found or recorded in the subsequent investigation.
This is a scientific marker that is completely separate from the sensational narrative of occult sacrifice or the unsupported claim of an overdose.
That is precisely the core analytical insight here. Investigators had a measurable, unexplained physical anomaly, the high lead, a true forensic flag.
It could have pointed toward occupational exposure, environmental factors at the quarry, or even a specific method of poisoning.
And yet, the public and, it seems, the media chose to focus entirely on the unconfirmed folklore.
And we have to talk about the state of forensics in 1972.
Right. We know modern DNA testing was impossible. An FBI crime lab report, which was acquired much later by advocates, it confirmed that immediate forensic handicap.
What did it say?
It said the stains found on her remaining clothing, Her underwear, bra, blouse, and slacks were, quote, too decomposed for conclusive blood and semen examinations at that time.
So the extent of the decomposition fundamentally limited any early forensic opportunities to link a suspect to the scene.
Beyond the medical and forensic hurdles, the early police investigation itself seems to have been hampered by procedural issues.
The sources mention the case struggled because of a lack of public tips, and this is crucial, inconsistent stories told to the police by her family, her friends, her peers.
That kind of inconsistency makes building a stable timeline or a solid suspect pool nearly impossible.
There was one early lead, though, about a transient man known only as Red.
Yes, he was known to live in the woods near the quarry, and he allegedly fled his campsite shortly after Jeannette disappeared. This is a very common profile for an early suspect in a remote area homicide.
But the Union County Prosecutor's Office ultimately dismissed this lead.
They did.
And looking back, we have to ask, what criteria were they using in 1972 to definitively dismiss a transient who vanished right after a body was found in his area? Dismissing Red might have been a critical early mistake.
It could have diverted resources away from a tangible, if marginalized, suspect. And then we get to the documented internal failures of the police work itself.
The purse.
The purse. The sources confirm this specific shortcoming, which was highlighted in later documentaries. A retired police officer mentioned that Jeannette's purse was never entered into evidence.
That's more than just a bureaucratic error. It is a fundamental investigative misstep.
It's huge.
A purse in a missing person case is often the key to the last hours of their life. It could have a train ticket, notes, phone numbers, money, all clues to where she was going or who she was meeting.
And losing or failing to log a crucial item like that means vital early investigative avenues were just sealed off. It adds to the list of compounding errors that doomed this case to go cold.
So, we exit 1972 with a murder defined by an inconclusive autopsy, a strange toxicology result with a lead, clear procedural failure with the missing purse, and a lack of cooperation from the victim's social circle.
It was a perfect storm. It created the vacuum that the sensational narrative would just rush in to fill.
And this is where the story pivots completely. It goes from a tragic, unsolved homicide to a cultural flashpoint of suburban fear. The conflicting details about the items found at the Devil's Teeth Quarry immediately became the central focus, and that's what drove the narrative of occult activity.
We have to be meticulous here, separating fact from folklore, even the early folklore. The sources note the most commonly agreed upon accounts from witnesses at the scene.
So what was generally accepted?
What was generally accepted was that her skeletal remains were found inside a boundary described as a coffin-shaped perimeter. It was constructed of fallen branches and logs.
Okay. And inside this outline, there were also several small makeshift wooden crosses. Those objects, the perimeter and the crosses, that's highly unusual for a random dumping site.
Very. It strongly suggests staging or a deliberate attempt to create some kind of symbolic environment around the body.
But then the claims escalated dramatically. They moved straight into the highly sensational.
Indeed. The rumors that really captured national attention involved residents later claiming that DePalma's remains were found lying on a pentagram.
A five-pointed star, typically associated with the occult.
Right, and that the scene was surrounded by mutilated animal remains. This moved the crime from murder to ritual sacrifice.
And this is the crucial distinction that got lost in the panic. Law enforcement authorities officially and consistently denied these specific sensational claims.
They did. They stated they found no pentagram and no evidence of animal mutilation at the immediate scene. But once these details were out there, the facts just ceased to matter.
The sensational claims are just far more compelling, regardless of the official denial.
Exactly. This information, often amplified without any verification, it immediately propelled the media onto a specific, terrifying course.
And this happened fast. Within 2 weeks of the discovery, before any definitive cause of death was even established, local newspapers, including the massive New York Daily News and the Newark Star-Ledger, started reporting that Jeannette was the victim of an occult sacrifice.
To understand the intensity, you just have to look at the headlines. We see reports framed around these terrifying questions. Girls sacrificed in witch rite.
And priest's theory. Devil's disciples killed girl. These headlines didn't just report the news. They actively fueled the hysteria. They dictated the public interpretation of the tragedy.
And the source of this powerful speculation was twofold. First, the admittedly strange objects reported at the scene. But second, and perhaps most influential, were the theories put forth by James Tate.
Tate was the pastor of the DePalma family's Assemblies of God Church.
And we should remember, the Assemblies of God is a highly conservative evangelical denomination. The belief in active satanic influence and spiritual warfare is common.
So Pastor Tate publicly embraced and amplified these occult theories. He suggested the murder was carried out by Satanists or a local coven of witches operating inside the nearby Watchung reservation.
And this narrative spread like wildfire. You have to appreciate the broader social context of Union County at the time.
The community was already profoundly shaken.
Right. The John List murders, that horrifying systematic killing of an entire family in nearby Westfield, that had happened only 10 months prior.
That context is vital. The John List murders just destroyed the popular post-war myth of the safe, perfect American suburb. People were already deeply fearful and looking for explanations for shocking, random violence right in their backyard.
So the idea of unseen, sinister forces like Satanism or a local witch cult, it provided a frightening but structurally comprehensible explanation for Jeannette's death.
It was emotionally easier to accept organized evil than random chaos or, frankly, investigative failure.
That theory created genuine panic across Union County communities, and the occult narrative became the central, defining feature of the case for 50 years. It completely overshadowed the frustrating medical facts, like the high lead levels or the ambiguous cause of death.
The case just became folklore.
It did.
Which brings us to the most important modern development, one that serves as a powerful rebuttal to this decades-long theory.
The updated reporting from Weird NJ in 2024.
And Weird NJ was pivotal in reviving the cold case in the first place.
They were, and they took the step of acquiring copies of DePalma's official case file documentation and, crucially, the original crime scene photographs from the Union County Prosecutor's Office.
So they could check the folklore against the hard visual evidence that was captured on that first day.
Exactly. After reviewing all this official documentation and the photographs, their conclusion was definitive. It directly challenged the prevailing myth.
And what was it?
They stated they were, quote, confident that there was no occult activity involved in her death.
Wow. That's a direct deconstruction of the mythology.
It is. They further specified that the official crime scene photos contain no evidence of the various rumored ritualistic elements. No crosses made from sticks and twigs, no halo of stones, and specifically no evidence of animal sacrifices.
So this suggests the sensational claims were either extreme exaggeration by witnesses, amplified by the media,
or they were entirely fabricated over time.
The 2024 Forensic Photo Review is an absolute watershed moment. It strips away the sensational framework that defined Jeannette DePalma's death for 50 years, and it forces us to return to the reality.
An unsolved homicide that was hampered by procedural and forensic failures, not by satanic cover-ups. After the initial media frenzy subsided, the case quickly entered cold file status. The momentum was just lost, largely due to the lack of a clear suspect and that inconclusive evidence.
But public advocacy really ensured the case was never truly forgotten.
That renewed interest began in the late 1990s and early 2000s, and it was spearheaded by Weird NJ magazine.
They started reporting on the case after they received several anonymous letters about DePalma's death, suggesting there was much more to the story than the official record admitted.
The magazine's editor, Mark Moran, he became a major advocate. And his investigation immediately highlighted a massive investigative obstacle, the controversy around the missing case file.
Moran alleged that the Springfield police had lost or even intentionally destroyed the original file,
which just fed into the suspicion of a deliberate cover-up.
The police have provided a specific defense for that, though. They claim the file was lost due to extensive flooding caused by Hurricane Floyd in 1999.
But for the public, the question remains. Was it an act of nature, negligence, or an intentional destruction of crucial investigative history?
The sources do note that some advocates allege a copy of the original file is still on file somewhere within the Union County prosecutor's system.
The practical difference between a file damaged by a flood and one that has just vanished is immense. If it was water damage, some documents might be recovered or reconstructed. If it was destroyed or just lost through negligent record-keeping, it means future investigators are flying blind.
The absence of the file has fueled decades of speculation about possible cover-ups.
Of course. Specifically because it prevents any independent review of the original police methodologies and decisions, like why the lead about Red was dismissed so quickly.
Moran eventually teamed up with correspondent Jesse P. Pollock, and together they co-wrote Death on the Devil's Teeth.
And that became the definitive text for anyone following this case. Through their painstaking research, Pollock and Moran highlighted several possible investigative failures. They drew connections to other unsolved murders in the region, and they brought forward previously unknown suspects.
They ensured that Jeannette's case remained in the public eye and kept pressure on the authorities for action.
Beyond the journalism, there's been a significant push from the public to apply modern science to this mystery, primarily through DNA testing.
This shows just how persistent the public effort has been to find answers.
Yes. A man named Edward Salzano actually initiated legal action. He sued the Union County Prosecutor's Office to try and compel the testing of Jeannette DePalma's remaining clothing for DNA evidence.
He also secured key documentation himself.
He did. He obtained a box of documents that contained the FBI crime lab report and the original medical examiner's report from Jeannette's nephew, John Bancy, shortly before Bancy passed away.
And what did those documents confirm?
Well, they confirmed the unfortunate reality of the limitations. The FBI crime lab report from 1972 explicitly stated that the stains found in her clothing were, again, too decomposed for conclusive blood and semen examinations at that time.
So even though modern DNA technology is far superior,
the extent to which any viable DNA survived the original decomposition, the subsequent storage, and any potential environmental damage, it remains a massive and heartbreaking challenge. The science may have advanced, but the evidence degraded 50 years ago.
despite that difficulty, the case recently took a very dark and serious turn. It introduced a terrifyingly plausible new lead.
A connection to one of New Jersey's most notorious killers. I'm referring to Richard Cottingham, also known as the Torso Killer.
A convicted serial killer who was operating extensively in New Jersey and New York right around the time Jeannette disappeared.
And his known modus operandi involved extreme violence, frequently targeting young women.
In 2021, Cottingham made a series of written statements directly to Jesse P. Pollock, the journalist who co-wrote the book.
Yes, this was a deliberate attempt by the incarcerated killer to communicate about this specific case.
And what did he say?
He specifically alluded to the possibility that he may have abducted and killed Jeannette DePalma. His suggestion was that he encountered her while she was hitchhiking, a behavior common at the time and one that fits his known predatory patterns perfectly.
Pollock, understanding the gravity of this, forwarded the correspondence immediately to the Union County Prosecutor's Office.
This is a lead that completely changes the analytical framework of the case. It moves it from a theory of occult ritual to the known signature crime of a documented serial predator who was active in that exact geographic area.
And Cottingham didn't just mention it. He indicated a willingness to cooperate.
He did. He agreed to speak with investigators about Jeannette's murder if they would meet with him, which strongly suggests a potential confession or at least detailed, usable information.
The information was deemed significant enough to be included in the updated 2022 edition of Death on the Devil's Teeth.
It was. However, a major point of current frustration is the official silence. Law enforcement has provided no public updates regarding this crucial lead since the end of 2022.
Which leaves advocates deeply concerned about whether this critical, non-sensational lead is being actively pursued.
And this link also connects Jeannette's murder to a larger pattern of regional violence. The book, A Long Walk Home, mentions Jeannette's case. It urges for it to be officially changed from a suspicious death to a confirmed homicide.
It also notes significant similarities between Jeannette's killing and the unsolved killings of Joan Kramer and Carol Ann Farino.
Right, suggesting a potential connection to a wider pattern of violence. If Cottingham is responsible for Jeannette, it not only solves her case, but potentially links her death to a larger known epidemic of serial murder that plagued the region in the 1970s.
So the case has gone from being defined by highly improbable folklore to being potentially redefined by the signature violence of a known predator.
The sustained public interest is just so evident. You can see it in the existence of the organization Justice for Jeannette DePalma. It's a group dedicated, even today, to keeping her memory alive and ensuring the investigation remains active.
It really underscores the community's demand for closure after 50 years.
Yes.
If we look back at the entire trajectory of this case, you see these core conflicts that define the investigation and how the public saw it. First, you have the foundational failure to solve the case due to forensic limitations and significant investigative missteps.
Notably the missing case file and that unlogged purse evidence.
Then you have the enduring, almost insurmountable power of the occult rumors, which defined the tragedy for 5 decades.
Despite the fact that law enforcement denied the pentagram claims from the beginning, and the recent 2024 analysis of the crime scene photos thoroughly debunked the sensational elements.
And finally, we have this new, intensely serious lead pointing directly toward Richard Cottingham, the torso killer. It suggests that the reality of her death was far more conventional, yet equally horrifying, than the sensationalized theories.
The case presents a really sobering lesson in the power of narrative over fact, especially during a traumatic period. The facts, the coroner's suspicion of strangulation, the unexplained high lead levels in her remains, they were all obscured by a far more compelling yet utterly unfounded narrative of ritual sacrifice.
It really forces you to consider the lasting impact of media sensationalism versus hard evidence. You have to wonder, how much did the focus on the Devil's Teeth cliff and the occult headlines prevent early investigators from pursuing more conventional, grounded leads?
Instead, they were focused on debunking the sensational claims.
Exactly. This case provides a stark look at how early rumors can dominate the perception of a tragedy for decades, creating a mythology that completely hides the stark truth of investigative failure.
The ultimate tragedy here is the taking of a young life, and then the subsequent investigative environment that allowed the facts to be eclipsed by fear. We can only hope that the renewed efforts by the organization Justice for Jeannette and this critical connection to Richard Cottingham may finally lead to the clarity her family and the public deserve.
Thanks for listening.